Hello and welcome to Threefold Herbal Healing. I'm Herbalist Leo Sade. I help people who are sick and tired or feeling sick and tired or people that are struggling with chronic conditions grow their health from the roots up. Today I'm going to talk about understanding what metabolic syndrome and diabetes are. I'm talking about this topic because at one point in my life, I was pre-diabetic. And the 10 minutes that I spent in the doctor office where he told me that, he didn't explain what it was and how I can reverse it. So I want to start by explaining what it is and then what questions you may want to ask your practitioner or even yourself when it comes to metabolic syndrome. Last week, I talked about metabolism. I talked about healthy metabolism. Metabolism is the chemical process that happens in each and every one of your cells where your body produces energy so the cells can function, the tissue can function, the organs can function, and the entire body can function. But in order to understand metabolic syndrome, diabetes, what can go wrong with metabolism, you might want to go first and read Metabolism and Your Health or listen to it and understand how healthy metabolism works. Now, for most of the human history, people struggle with food safety. They didn't have enough food. The human body, therefore, is not happy when you skip food that you have access for. It is not happy when you don't finish all the food in your plate, or if it knows that you have snacks in your pantry and some food in the refrigerator, and you pass a place and there is food and the smell. It's like it want to have more. It feels like scarcity or famine is just around the corner. Therefore, it doesn't believe there is an abundance. But now, if you live in the Western world, there is a good chance that you actually have access to plenty of fuel, which raises the question, what happens with the excess? Where do you store and how do you store excess fuel in your body? Metabolic syndrome and diabetes are actually energy storage crises. To understand them, you need to understand the role of insulin in the metabolic process. So, what is insulin and what is the role of insulin? Insulin is an hormone that is secreted by the pancreas in response to an increase in blood glucose level. The role of insulin is to maintain blood glucose level within fairly narrow range by facilitating glucose uptake into the cells or inhibiting glucose release from storage. Cells produce energy in the mitochondria. Last week, I explained how glucose played the role of the wood that fuels the metabolic fire in a healthy metabolic process. For that to happen, glucose needs to reach the mitochondria. It needs to enter the cell. This is where insulin becomes handy. Insulin acts as a key that unlocks the cell doors, allowing glucose to enter the cells and facilitate the energy production within the cells. So what could go wrong? If we use the steam engine analogy again to describe cell energy production, what would happen to the steam engine burner if we feed it too many logs? The temperature in the burner will rise until the walls of the burner can no longer bear the heat, and they either melt or they explode. That is exactly what happens in cells if they don't control the amount of glucose that enter the cells. To prevent metabolic rate from going out of hands, cells protect themselves by rationing the amount of glucose they allow into them. When blood glucose is consistently high, cells will reduce their sensitivity to insulin, meaning that if insulin knocks on the cell's doors, they do not open, they do not respond. So what happens is that you have high level of glucose in the blood, but cells don't open their door. In insulin resistant, the body has too much glucose circulating in the blood, and cells that are hungry for glucose are not responding to insulin. Insulin resistance is an energy crisis in the cells of the body. When your cells are starving, they want to eat the glucose, but the glucose is not coming in, they start to malfunction. Insulin resistance affects every cell in your body. Therefore, symptoms can occur throughout the body. One factor contributing to your chances of developing insulin resistance is how efficient your fat cells store the excess fuels. People who constantly consume excess calories will produce more fat cells to store all this excess calorie. Fat cells might increase their size up to 4 times of their original normal size. However, those fat cells become inefficient at some point, leading to toxic fats floating in the blood and blocking the arteries, but also blocking insulin signaling. When excess energy can't be efficiently stored in fat cells, it will be diverted to storage in organs and tissues that are not designed to store energy, such as the liver. That's how you get a non-alcoholic liver, fatty liver. Some people are born with insufficient storage capacity. They are at risk of developing insulin resistance independently of their caloric intake. They might be thin, but still develop insulin resistance. Inflammation is another factor that can cause insulin resistance, independently of obesity. People with chronic sustained inflammation are at high risk of developing insulin resistance. And finally, where you store fat in your body is an important factor to consider. People with excess fat around their waist, around the stomach, those people that have like a beer belly, are at greater risk of insulin resistance, partly because those are body fat, belly fat is a sign of inflammation. But I will talk about the different placement of fat in the body next week, so stay tuned for that. What is really metabolic syndrome? Metabolic syndrome is a cluster of symptoms that increases the risk of heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. The diagnostic criteria includes this abdominal obesity, so fat around the middle of the body, high triglyceride, higher than 150 milligram per liter, lower HDL, high blood pressure, and high fasting blood glucose. Untreated metabolic syndrome can, if not treated, become diabetes. So if you know that you have metabolic syndrome, you want to take care of it before it turns to a full-blown diabetes that is much harder to reverse. What is diabetes? Diabetes isn't really one condition, it's a cluster of conditions that include high blood sugar as a result of either low insulin production, sometimes because damage to the pancreas, and or insulin resistance. The classic symptoms are increase in urination, increase in thirst, and increase in hunger. In ancient time, diabetes was diagnosed by the presence of sweet urine. Can you believe it? The health practitioner would taste the urine or observe if it was attracting ants. Modern science have found that blood of a person with diabetes is thick. Then it's much thicker than normal blood because it's like a syrup because of all the sugar in it. There are a couple of reasons that contribute to this syrupy consistency of blood of diabetic person. Excess blood sugar leads to frequent urination and eventually to dehydration, which reduce the plasma, so the fluidy part of the blood, in comparison to the protein part of the blood, so the blood cells themselves. So you have less fluid in the blood and more blood cells. The other thing is that glucose stick to blood proteins, making them heavy and slowing down their movement in blood cells. So overall, you can see the connection to heart disease. There are two types of diabetes. Type 1 diabetes happens when the body is unable to produce enough insulin. It happens because of damage to the pancreas mostly. It was called juvenile diabetes because it was commonly diagnosed in childhood. But nowadays, some people are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in adulthood. The common cause of type 1 diabetes in adults is an autoimmune disease that damages the pancreas. Type 2 diabetes is a condition characterized by insulin resistance. As the condition progresses, it might lead to damage to the pancreas because the cells are resisting the insulin and there are high level of glucose in the blood. The pancreas will continue to pump insulin into the body more and more and more because it's trying to wake up the cells. Eventually, it will lead to damage to the pancreas. About 1 in 2 Americans are at risk of either prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, which is a lot. During the COVID epidemic, the people who were at risk for the worst outcome were those with metabolic conditions. Yet the institutions, the health institutions, Fauci and all those people were pushing for vaccination, social isolation, and mask. And they neglected to mention the health risk of metabolic syndrome. There was no education about it, which made me very frustrated. Metabolic conditions are partially social problem. People in low-income neighborhoods and in towns that are in poverty have less access to healthy food. They struggle with high stress level that contribute to insulin resistance, inflammation, and diabetes. And they have less access to healthcare. Research found that exposure to poverty in childhood increase your risk of developing metabolic conditions. So it is mainly a problem of poor people. Not only, but a lot of poor people tend to have metabolic condition. If you're struggling with metabolic syndrome or diabetes, you want to find a holistic health practitioner who can tailor a unique care plan for your body and lifestyle. Don't neglect metabolic conditions. They really shorten your lifetime by decades. You can make significant improvement to your metabolic health through lifestyle modification, herbs, and supplements. There is a lot there right now that can help you reverse metabolic conditions, especially metabolic syndrome when you are still in the first phases of unhealthy metabolism. So seriously, people, don't neglect it. Take care of yourself. It's longevity, it's quality of life, so much to do to support your health. That's it for today. I hope it was beneficial. I would love it if you tell me what you learn, if you have any questions, and if I can help you in any way. Thank you for listening, and see you next week when I am going to talk about all kinds of fats and where in the body we store them can tell us about our metabolic health. Bye.